We're live on YouTube.
Okay, hello, welcome everyone. This is another edition of the Foolish Tech Show. We're here primarily to support our products and services. So if you have any questions, please join us in our RC chat and let us know what you'd like to discuss. You can get to that by going to foolishit.com/live or foolishtechshow.com, and you can watch our videos there and also get into the chat. It's very simple, very straightforward to do that, rather. Sorry about yesterday's show. We had some difficulties with my virtual machines, and we just had gotten back from a long trip. So we'll chalk that up to a little bit of jet lag and a little bit of bad VM mojo. But if you'd like, we can just get into the usual tech discussion. We're at election day in this country, and so things are a little bit weird and wild out there, a little bit more so than normal. Just FYI, but hopefully the news will be a little bit less politically motivated today, although that's probably not going to be the case.
Yeah, it's probably still going to be pretty political for the next few days.
That
even after the election, but I will sure be glad to stop seeing it.
Yeah, me too. That being said, I'd like to welcome Rover and Shook and Noam and Futures Tech Nelson. Got to see him down there in Austin this past week. That was a whole lot of fun. So thank you so much for joining me. And again, sorry about yesterday's show if you happen to be there for that. Let's see. What is in the news today? You have anything to chat about? Anything new in your life, Proctor?
Not really.
So we're seeing infrastructure attacks, it looks like, and not just in this country. We've had some, I think, some issues where some nuclear plants and some other things have been potentially probed in the past, but now we're seeing a story like this, which basically it looks like a distributed denial of service attack. Those are pretty common these days, and they've been used to take the internet offline, at least in certain areas. We've obviously affected us here on the East Coast a little while back, but it's continuing. And Finland, a country in northern latitudes, it sounds like they need their heat up there, and it looks like the DDoS attack may have taken out the computers that were controlling the heating in buildings. Their specific buildings. This wasn't, across the country. I don't want to blow this out of proportion, but it's this is the new type of 21st century warfare that we're seeing. It's not just a leaked email or something like that. This affects people's lives. I think we should up the security on our infrastructure for public utilities. I think they need to be hardened, and I know that's going to take some money and some time to accomplish, but I don't want to see something like this happen here. I don't want to see you turn off the electricity for 300+ million Americans. It's not going to be a pretty sight. So there's that.
Well, the U.S. government does report that they're making unprecedented efforts to protect Tuesday's presidential election from cyber attacks.
That's good. I don't know what that means exactly.
Yeah,
but
intelligence, I don't either. Intelligence officials told NBC that for the first time, hundreds of military and intelligence cyber experts who work on top secret facilities will be monitoring intelligence about the U.S. presidential election.
Well, okay. Well, that's good. All of our voting machines are offline. They're not connected to the internet, so
right.
At least there's that. I do believe it's certainly possible, and they showed this. So they had a story, I believe, yesterday about the voting machines being still, compromised the day before the election. Well, yeah, you can go in there, you can take a PCM, CIA card, a PC card, whatever, stick it in, reprogram it, flash it, do a whole lot of things, but I really don't see that being terribly commonplace. It's actually quite involved, and even if that were to happen, it would be one voting facility compromised, and one might be enough, but I would hope that it certainly doesn't seem like it could be something widespread enough to actually influence one way or the other the election, but it's hard to say. I hope that also gets worked out as time moves forward, just like our infrastructure for the utilities and all. Same way with the voting.
Yeah, well, we all know that the presidential election is very important this year, but several states are considering legalizing recreational use of marijuana. Voters in Arizona, California, Maine, Massachusetts, and Nevada will consider legalizing marijuana recreational use.
It's interesting. It looks that would make it the entire West Coast. It looks like, as well as a couple of Northeast states.
Yeah, Maine and Massachusetts.
Yeah. That would be interesting if it starts to permeate the East Coast as well. That has not happened, obviously. Yeah, well, that's interesting news. A lot of stuff going around this election season. I wasn't aware that all that was happening, but that's what states' rights are about, I guess. We'll have to see. Last week I pulled a newbie, Rover says. Yeah, well, I did too. I apparently don't know how to revert my virtual machines back to a known working state. So I'm right there with you. It happens to me all the time. I guess it's only going to continue to happen as I age. But oh, you deleted some NAS, some files off your NAS. That's that sucks. Well, that's another thing we push around here are strong multi-layered backups. So a combination of online backups, on-site and off-site backups, things of that nature. Highly recommended. Storage is remarkably cheap these days, and there really is no excuse for it, given all the good automated backup tools that are out there, especially the cloud services that make that straightforward to do as well. You may not trust that. I'm not saying that you have to pick that type of solution, but some form of backup and some form of backup testing and some form of disaster mitigation definitely needs to be baked into your organizations. One folder with PDFs. Well, it doesn't matter what the type of file was. I'm sure it's important data that was there for a reason. Obviously.
Were you able to recover it with a backup or something, Rover? Oh, while the stream catches up, the NAS, depending on which one it is, may possibly undeleted them. Yeah, okay. A lot of network attached storage devices have a built-in recycle bin in case anytime something's deleted, it goes to that recycle bin on the NAS instead of actually being deleted immediately.
That's a very common practice. It should be a must-have feature if you're looking for a good NAS device. But they've gotten a lot more reliable these days. So I'm glad it saved you. Very glad, Rover. Let me see here. I hope you guys weren't hearing that ringing. So there apparently is a little bit of a push. Obviously, this happened because of the recent time change. We live in an area of the country, or we live in a country where we have 4 time zones in the mainland, and we also do the daylight savings time. But there is somewhat of a push, I guess there is every year, for there just to be one time, one universal coordinated time, UTC or something like that. And basically, it would be a little bit weird though. So what you would have a situation is where it's midnight, and it's midnight on the clock, except it could be in the morning or noon or night, where you are. Would you be okay with that, Proctor?
I didn't follow you, Michael.
Okay, so if this article is about potentially doing away with time zones and daylight savings time, and so
Oh,
everybody's on the same time. So in other words, if it's in Greenwich, if it's noon, it's noon here as well, regardless of what the sky looked like.
Yeah, you know how many APIs I had to go through to get proper time coordination through time zones and Eastern and Standard Daylight Savings Time and all this mess and the D7X code platform. I do not want this to happen now. I just
I understandable. I'm sure developers out there across the board
five
are,
different APIs involved in that. It's, I mean, to do it right.
yeah. Yep, it's 3 p.m. UTC right now. That being said, Rover points out, that being said, it certainly doesn't look like 3 p.m. to me outside. It would be a shock, I think, to a lot of people, and certainly the developers who spent a whole lot of time creating the code to make it work in the current system that I guess that article agrees is maybe broken in the sense of
Well, see, you can create the code to make it work in like one or two lines or one or two calls on the API, but it's not going to be like working 100% of the time. You know, I mean, the daylight savings time really throws people off too. I said, how about we just ditch that?
yeah, I
yeah, I
think
would
that'd be
agree
a
with
good place
that. I
to
mean, my,
mm,
my,
go.
my, my, my kids think we're supposed to go to bed at 5 o'clock now because it's dark.
Well, we go by we're gonna go by the sun regardless. It's the time is arbitrary, but I don't know. I think most people do like the idea of the sun being high in the sky at noon.
Yeah.
Yeah, cows can't read time. No other animals can read time, as far as we're aware, or have the same concept of time that we do, and um, they seem to get along just fine. It's certainly not a requirement,
Yeah, but
but
the rooster crows at sunrise still.
yeah, exactly. Whenever that time actually may be on our watches. Um, so another story that's non-politically oriented, and I'm so happy that there's at least a few stories like that today. Not a ton, but there are more than yesterday. Yesterday was horrendous. But so we apparently the Navy, we've built a new battleship. It's supposed to be incredibly impressive with some amazing guns that can fire. That fire basically rocket assisted precision guided projectiles with GPS targeting.
Do you have a link on that?
Yeah, so
Is that the destroyer?
yeah, I believe this is a good link. So here we go. So they're testing this guy out, but from what I understand, it's going to cost them $800,000 for every projectile they fire. $800,000, and there is still a chance you might miss. Imagine. So basically, it looks like we have this big gun, these big guns on this big ship. However, we'll probably never be firing it because of costs.
And also, the Russians are currently working on a battleship that's much more powerful. It's nuclear powered instead of diesel, which I think the U.S. one is still diesel powered. Has more missiles, has better targeting capabilities to target our missiles,
Mm-hmm.
um, and it's a little scary.
Well, yeah,
The U.S. being on top in military technology, and
and it's,
that might
yeah,
be changing.
they're making some compromises. For instance, there was a story about them having to. So the idea is this: instead of buying, for instance, a whole fleet of the next generation, let's say, what is that new next generation fighter? Is F-35 or something? I can't remember what it is.
Yeah.
But so instead of doing that, they were considering buying a whole lot more, like F-15s and 16s and other fighters that have been the staple of our Air Force for previous generations, because they're cheap and inexpensive, and they're they're very reliable, and the pilots still generally tend to like them, as opposed to these newer ones. Well, that's okay if they work and are effective, but yeah, these foreign governments, these foreign powers are catching up, and once you start to erode uh, that advantage, maybe we would be expecting the same amount of cooperation that we tend to get these days when we want to get something done. But there's all sorts of different views on that. There's whether we should be doing that to the first place, whether we should be involved in as many wars as we are, and other factors. But it certainly looks like the military budgets are taking a hit.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the reasons that we won the Cold War, one of the reasons that we never went to nuclear war during the Cold War was the fact that both sides had enough weapons to destroy the other side, so it didn't make any sense to start the war in the first place. But if one side has the ability to stop the other side's missiles from ever reaching them, then there's a much more likelihood of that type of war happening.
Yeah, absolutely. Mutually assured destruction is not a concept I would like to always have in place. But it was very effective for basically stopping the non-escalation of that. I mean, that was decades and decades and decades from the 1950s onwards, and up until the early 90s, right? And we got through that okay. But that was, two huge superpowers. Now it's starting to be a whole lot other. We've got so many other nuclear powers to worry about today versus back then.
Right. Then we were worried about one country annihilating us, but now we have lots of threats that could possibly launch one or two missiles, and that's one or two nukes going off in the U.S. is one too many.
Yeah, I mean, it's not going to necessarily take out the entire planet. And I know Rover's pointing out we have enough nukes to kill the Earth 12 times over. That may still very well be it's probably accurate currently. But not even one or two is acceptable, I think, to anyone. And there's no guarantee those nukes aren't going to necessarily be delivered over here. Certainly within the next couple of decades, long-range deliveries are going to improve to the point where even North Korea and their backwards technology will probably be able to make something like that happen. China, North Korea, and Russia are still entities to worry about even in modern times, and until we start working a little bit more closely and not see these aggressive postures in the South China Sea, and certainly the aggressive postures with Putin in Crimea and the Ukraine, those things are going to continue to happen. It's kind of scary. Anyway, gloom and doom. Let's see. Apparently, Obama doesn't like the fact about Facebook running fake news stories. I don't think anybody does, but they're suggesting that it promotes tainting the.
I don't think the news stories are any less fake than the ads that are run on television.
Oh, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I heard one last night that was it was sound bites that were just put together to make one of the candidates look bad, and they were all of them were totally out of context. It was just ridiculous. And I've seen it in the national election as well as the state election.
And both sides do it
on both sides, and it's ridiculous.
Both sides do that, and that's largely always been the case. It's just amazing now that how many more people they can reach with those lies. I think is what's really making the difference with social media. Now these lies are spread just as wide and far as any amount of truth is, and in fact more so. It probably is, I would say, a large proportion of fake stories for every one potentially real story that's out there. And it's hard, if not impossible, for anyone to actually dig through all that without spending 100% of their time doing that and nothing else. It's difficult for me to find accurate data. Like, for instance, I was trying to do some research on law enforcement, and I was just realizing that this question was posed to the FBI director when not that long ago, when some of these fatal shootings happened. How many people are you shooting in a police station? What are the demographics? Lot of questions that you would want answered, and we want to see what the real situation is across the country, or is this just media, or is it something else? I wanted the data. I wanted the hard facts. And guess what I found? And guess what the FBI director kind of explained is that the data doesn't exist. Nobody's keeping track of it. There's certain large police departments like New York City, for instance, that does keep track of that data, but there's no mandate to do that across the country, meaning that any local PD place may not have any records at all. And the other thing that I found interesting, and this is kind of scary, I thought, it's that in many places there is disciplinary records are allowed to be destroyed after a period of time, sometimes just a year, sometimes 18 months, but it varies. States have enacted laws that say the police departments can basically just destroy their disciplinary files. And were you aware of another? Yeah, were you aware of another issue? There's something called gypsy cops, and a large portion of gypsy cops were involved in the shootings, or there were gypsy cops rather involved in some of the high-profile shootings that you've seen. But basically, it's a cop that goes to a police department, gets hired, does everything wrong, and then resigns at the end of the year and moves to the neighboring police PD and gets hired there. Even typically, a lot of times, even before the investigations into their previous behaviors are completed. And so there was one particular cop, 9 PDs in 9 years, and in every one of them faced severe disciplinary action, to the point where basically it was either him resigning or getting fired and incarcerated.
And something needs to be done to improve that. That's true.
Yeah, and so there's no background checks. Apparently, if a police officer walks in and they've graduated the academy, that's all that's necessary for another police department to hire them without question. So, to me, after reading those things, there definitely needs to be some transparency.
I'm sure they do a criminal background check, but the thing is that those things probably wouldn't have escalated to a criminal charge anyway.
And the other thing is that there's such a dislike between the local PDs and the FBI, they're not even willing to share the data, even if they did have it or collected it. There's so many problems with that that need to be addressed. And you can be extremely pro-police, but I believe, there needs to be some transparency, because you're never going to convince the larger population that you're serving their best interests, when things like gypsy cops come up. So anyway, hey Nelson, how you doing?
Yeah, hey Nelson. Good seeing y'all at Spice World. We had a good time.
I wanted to make you aware, Proctor, of the Gmail's iPhone app improvements. Have you seen that?
You said the Gmail app?
Yeah.
I haven't yet.
You finally get an undo send in your Gmail app there, and apparently faster searches.
Undo send.
So
that's been needed a few times. Did you have a link about that?
Yeah, sure. Here's the updated Gmail app link. Okay. Looks like
has the Android app for Gmail or previously had the unsend button and these features?
I think so. I don't use the undo that often. Let me. I don't know. What do I have to do? Send an email to check that? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question, to tell you the truth.
Okay, that'd be good.
I thought it was. I thought it was there, but can't recall ever using it, so I can't support that. Looks like Facebook's getting sued for racial discrimination regarding the advertising that they're doing. Turns out the Federal Housing Act of 1964 basically does not allow the exclusion of people based upon race or other factors. And it turns out that when doing this advertising, there's a way to target. They allow affinity, what's known as affinity for certain racial subgroups, but that's explicitly illegal. in housing advertising and job advertising explicitly. So it's Hey, Ian, good morning. Glad to see you. Welcome. We're just discussing some potential problems with Facebook up against some racial discrimination. I can understand why advertisers would want to target groups. I mean, obviously, look, if you're selling something that only a subgroup of the population enjoys, you want to get to just those people, right?
Yeah.
I don't know that there's anything inherently wrong with that, but I do understand the law, and I understand why it was put in place to prevent.
Yeah, and I definitely understand why you wouldn't want an employer to target a particular group like that. That is definitely discrimination. I mean, if you're selling women's razors, then that's a bit different. But if you're looking for employment, you shouldn't be limiting that to one particular group. That's definitely discrimination.
Exactly, and that being said, I think they probably are, and they might lose this one.
I wonder if they even realized they were doing it, or if it was just we put this mechanism in place so that people could target different demographics and
I don't think they did it with malicious intent.
Yeah,
I don't think that they set out necessarily to do that. It just they needed to be checked though, because not everybody does puts all those pieces together. Not everybody.
I mean, and when you're as big as Facebook, you should be checking stuff like this. It's not like they just threw it together maybe they did throw it together haphazardly, but you think they'd have checked it a little better.
They're big enough. They share a large responsibility of their actions, and the issue with this is again that it's housing and job advertisements, and I think we would both agree that those are the places where you do not want this to happen.
Exactly.
Looks like Tesla buyers will have to pay to use superchargers now, which are the quick charge stations that they have. You'll have to pay a fee for it, and it's going to be charged incrementally, and it's supposed to cost less than the price of filling up a comparable gas car. But I'm sure that's going to make those customers a little bit unhappy. There's details on that. The only reason I really bring this article up is because we saw a tremendous number of Teslas in Austin. There are a ton of Teslas in Austin.
I don't know. I've seen a lot of Teslas in High Point.
But that's the highest Tesla population I've seen. But I don't live where you do, so.
Yeah, well, I don't normally see High Point as a place that you see a lot of exotic vehicles, but do see quite a few of them. And maybe it's the same one. I just see it over and over again.
So, do you think it's a good idea for the results to be immediately published by Google and available in like 30 different languages?
Let me breeze through the article before I decide.
Good call. Yes.
Results of what?
I mean, I don't think there's much of a debate. The polls will be closed at that point. They're free to do that legally.
Historically, it's taken weeks to count all the votes and stuff. I mean,
that's true.
I mean, all the major news outlets are going to be reporting on exit polls, and
they've been doing that for years.
Yeah, immediately after the polls close, or even before the polls close. So I don't see that that Google should be treated any differently than the other news outlets are.
Exactly.
No. You're absolutely right. I just wonder about that whole system in general, though. Not that Google's doing anything different than anyone else, but how the accuracy of the data that they're reporting. I guess I don't want a situation where somebody reports that one person won, and that's not the truth of the matter.
Yeah, that's true.
That being said, there appears to be yet another Samsung Galaxy phone that may be exploding. Never heard of this. The J5, Samsung Galaxy J5 This may be this may just be a certain part of the world, I think. And this is, I think, a French smartphone. But it's definitely not the Note 7. So
Starting to think that Samsung should give up on cell phones and just go into the small arms business.
they've gotten more bomb experience in the past several releases there with their products. Yeah, their trust is okay. And I read another story. I don't have the article in front of me, but something like Apple is, because of the Samsung issue, Apple is pulling in something like over 100% of the smartphone market. I heard something
100%.
Well, that's what I didn't understand. How could you be pulling in more than 100% of anything?
Well, I mean, how could you can't even be pulling in 100%. That would mean nobody else is selling cell phones.
That's true. I got to find this article.
That could be right. I mean, most of the people I know who have bought Note 7s and are having to replace them are replacing them with other Androids, but obviously a small sampling.
Mm-hmm.
But I would suspect that it could possibly lead to some increased sales for Apple because of this.
Oh, certainly.
I've been really happy with Samsung products that don't have moving parts. So it's disappointing to see them have these issues.
It's very disappointing. I've used their phones now for a while, and I certainly have gripes and complaints like everyone else, but I did not have any concern about my health or safety with the devices. It's definitely going to hurt them. They're going to have to spend a tremendous amount of time and money to win back people's trust, and I don't like that because reduces competition effectively. There's going to be people that are going to make the decision solely based upon that and nothing else, and that's fine. And I agree in many cases, but they're one of the big players, and then I don't know if there's other players going to fill in that vacuum, and having Apple just replace it, the other big player in the market, is not really a solution. I mean, what if I were in the market for a new cell phone right now? Would my only choice be Apple effectively?
I mean, there's still tons of other.
Well, sure there are, but these are, if you want the top of the line phone, though, typically it's usually going to be one or the other of those.
Yeah, well, LG's got a good phone as well. I forget what it's called, what the model number is, the new one.
Yeah, HTC, LG, Google's got their stuff too that they're still doing. Yeah, they're definitely options, but I don't like to see any player exit the market completely. I think more competition is always better. What about, let's see. Looks like New Delhi is home to 400 million people, larger than the United States, and apparently its air quality is well beyond the hazardous level. The air quality index there is 999 on Monday. And the hazardous level is 500. The highest one recorded in China, China's most polluted city. We always consider China's cities, to sometimes be the top of the list, but they were only 298, and Delhi's was 999. I mean, that's horrible. The quality loss is apparently being caused by the reason it was so very bad is that farmers were burning their crops as a result of a Hindu festival that they, I guess, were participating in.
Something else.
It's crazy. I mean, people are dying as a result of that's enough to start causing you to die in the short term, not like, oh, I'm going to die 10, 20, 30 years from now because I'm breathing some bad air. Stuff like that's enough to potentially kill you immediately. And Snowden explains how to quickly search emails. There was some concern over how quickly the FBI recently went through all those emails that, from Hillary.
Yeah, I mean, what were they searching? I mean, I know what they were searching for, but what were they?
Well, the question was raised by Trump was that, how was it possible?
How do you go through 650,000 emails in 9 days or whatever?
So apparently on an old laptop, it could take minutes to hours to do. So it's apparently very easy. The way Edward Snowden explains it, you just drop non-responsive to CC and BCC fields, hash both sets of data, and subtract those that match. And that's, I think, a little bit less than a complete breakdown of what needs to be done. But
you have a link on that?
It's yeah, this is from GeekWire, I believe. But there are ways to do this, and it's not it's not that they didn't necessarily go through them. I mean, I guess without knowing how specifically they did it, you could still have questions about it, but it's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious they didn't sit down and read them, but
no, you wouldn't. Yeah. This is not. I don't think we ever expect somebody, because of the massive amounts of data these days, I don't think we ever expect anyone to ever read everything. In fact, you do know that most of the people that put the laws don't read them all.
Read the laws before they vote on them. Yeah, that's.
Yeah, exactly. They might have somebody else read them, or a group of staff people read it and explain it to them. But that's like, asking you to that's like the old thing where you tell somebody at one end of the line something to pass along, and by the time it gets to the next end of the line, what the hell? It's nothing like what.
Yeah, exactly. I played that game.
Exactly. So yeah, I don't necessarily think that that's acceptable.
Everything's open to interpretation too. So I really think our lawmakers should be reading our laws before they vote on them.
And why can't we make laws straightforward enough that they can be explained on a single page of paper? That might be a little bit extreme, and I know there's probably going to be laws that do require reams, but if the average person in a population can't understand it, how are they supposed to not violate it? Is the question.
I agree with you, but you
can't interpret the law.
Lawyers in business.
Yeah, maybe that should change.
I think one of the reasons our tax code is so complicated is if we made it more simple, we'd put a lot of accountants out of business.
Mm-hmm. Something happened at this British banking institution, caused 20,000 customers, 20,000 customers rather, to lose money. I was thinking about the whole recent Wells Fargo stuff, and terribly upset with that and what they did there. We've talked about it before, but they basically opened up a whole lot of accounts for people that they shouldn't have, millions of them, in fact. And Wells Fargo had, prior to that, a number of years prior to that, had been pushing, their ethics push was they did all sorts of things to push their ethical stance on this type of thing. And then, not but a few years later, it comes out that all of that had happened. So I've lost complete trust with them, and a lot of other businesses and governments and things have been pulling their money out. And I think that's a great thing. This type of infraction with money and trust in banking should never be allowed. And they need all the regulations in the world to prevent that type of thing from ever happening again. I don't like regulations in general that don't need to be in place, but it's clear that they can't do it themselves. I'm willing to give everybody the opportunity to correct their own faults, but if time and evidence doesn't support that, then
It's surprising it took so long for the Wells Fargo thing to come out. I mean, do people not balance their checkbooks?
no. Well, it's not. No, I mean, you basically somebody's opening up a loan that you don't know about it. It's not balancing checkbooks. It's not people they weren't stealing money from people. They were
I thought in
signing
some
them.
cases they were opening up deposit accounts and taking money out of one legitimate account and putting it into the other one account.
Ooh, I didn't know about
I think
that.
that was going on too.
Okay, well, that's just as bad, or if not, actually, that's far worse. Um, but not everybody, goes into those details, and maybe doesn't have you are our financial officer, so you hopefully have a better mindset in that regard. But that you can't expect the general population um, to be that meticulous. Should they? Probably, it's their money and their stuff. But if a loan was opened up that I wasn't aware of, it could take me a tremendous amount of time to figure that out.
Exactly. It would probably require that you either check your credit report regularly, which everybody should do, and at least once a year, and or it would require for you to apply for a loan and possibly get turned down because you have too much credit out there. That would be a red flag if you're expecting that you should be able to get credit and can't, and that could be an indication of some wrongdoing.
Yeah, and that's how I started the investigation when my brothers and my credit information were literally combined under one credit bureau, to the point where it looked like I was living and owned several houses and several cars, and all sorts of stuff with my debt to income ratio was just off the charts. Nobody would ever consider giving me anything with a credit bureau report like that, giving me a loan or a reasonable interest rate. And I found that out after the fact, and it took me, and I did it quickly. It took me almost 6 months to get it resolved, I believe. Most of it was done after 3, but I think the final details and making sure the other credit bureau reports were all good and straight took almost 6 months. And that's on the low end sometimes of the time it takes to get these situations resolved. And this is a case, and specifically in my case, I did nothing wrong. You know what I mean? This was a clerical error that basically cost me time and money and prevented me from buying a car. So it had a direct.
It wasn't due to identity theft or anything like that.
No,
it was just a total mistake.
it was a total mistake. My brother wasn't trying to steal my identity. He wasn't, nothing like that was going on. And it also doesn't help that in the case of Wells Fargo, when the other employees came up and said, "Hey, I don't feel comfortable. These are the practices I'll have to engage in order to, in order to meet your quotas, and I don't feel comfortable doing that." They had a line that they could call in and discuss this supposedly in a anonymous and safe manner, right?
From what I've heard, that employees that did that were getting canned.
Yeah, so it looks like all the employees who did that were fired, and a whole bunch of them filed, I believe, a class action suit against them solely for that purpose, solely for that reason, rather. I don't know if you guys trust Wikipedia at all, but Harvard research.
If my employer asked me to do something that I knew was morally wrong, I would probably quit my job.
Yeah.
Not going to walk across that line just for.
Yeah, I agree, but the job market is so bad that for some folks that may not be possible. And look, this day and age, you really have to be concerned about one particular thing. The next job that you quit may not ever exist again in the future. There are whole swaths of jobs that are going to completely disappear over the course of the next decade or so because of automation and other factors. And if you ask somebody like Elon Musk, he'll tell you that the only solution is a basic living wage, because there are going to be millions and millions and millions of people that there won't be jobs in existence for them to get anymore. It's really scary. really scary because, you know, this, I would have been like you and say, hey, yeah, just quit the job and move on to something else. But it may not actually be possible at some point in the future. Now, I guess, obviously you can attain a new skill set and get a job in a different area, of course, but that's always going to be possible. But economics don't allow that. That usually requires education, a lot of investment, and if you're barely eking by as it is, but if you want to know what's involved in actually hacking the voting machines that I was talking about earlier, oh no, the article I was going to say. So yeah, Wikipedia. Don't have a big. I have some trust issues with the content on Wikipedia. Of course, everyone does. But this Harvard researcher apparently finds that it's not quite as bad as naysayers would have you believe. They're specifically, obviously, this is a bias test on politics. They're talking about political bias, but it's yeah, it's not that bad. I'm happy to hear that. I guess that's a good story. And if you want to know how to hack that voting machine, like I mentioned, or how somebody might do it, here are the details. And the links in that article, they'll go into that. I think it's a bit involved. I'm not too concerned about that, as I mentioned. Oh, and that article about the Elon Musk.
Yeah, do you have that?
Tesla, SpaceX. He's the guy behind all that. Yeah, let me do that one. So, Elon Musk, universal basic income. So he's got to be one of the biggest capitalists. He's living the capitalist dream with his companies, and even he believes that that's going to have to come to pass. And another side offshoot of that is this article, and this is so tech workers in this country are paid well, more than anywhere else in the world, it would appear. And their argument is that maybe all the tech workers just need to take a pay cut for those jobs to still exist in the future. I know none of you guys listening to us out there want to hear that, but there's big arguments sometimes about that, and this is just a poll by Slashdot, just asking everybody. So there's not huge information in there, but that's a concern, and I only mentioned it as part of the Elon Musk conversation there.
Well, just like with products, the rules of supply and demand come into play when you're setting the salaries for workers. And if you want the workers with the higher skill level, you're going to have to pay them.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to always. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, but all of these things taken individually, they're bad individually, but taken together, it does not bode well for where things are moving. So, I don't know if I talked about this yesterday, but we had such a brief show, I don't think I focused on it. So man-made diamonds, I didn't realize how popular they were, and they're very difficult to distinguish. Looks like De Beers is upset about that. looks like they're creating something to a device that shines ultraviolet light so that it will detect these lab-grown ones. They're having a big push for, you know, the natural diamonds. De Beers has a capacity of 24,000 carats. That's pretty big, I would say. So they have a big interest in this. But this article on Slashdot kind of jokingly points you to this other story that they published, which indicates that they believe it may be raining diamonds on Saturn. If De Beers just goes to Saturn, maybe maybe their problem will be resolved. Apparently Chrome accounts for 55% of all web browsing, so they have the lead in the market. That's interesting because these are numbers that take Internet Explorer and Edge into account. So just 6 months ago, Chrome had 41.66%, barely beating out Microsoft's 41.35%, and now they have 54.99%. From a year ago, that's up 30%. That's huge increases. Internet Explorer and Edge are 28.39%, and Firefox stuck at 11. Interesting. What's your favorite browser out there, guys? I don't know. I'm using Chrome right now, so I guess
I've been using Chrome, but for a while. But
it's not great though. They need to.
I don't know. Some almost
memory issues.
Yeah, yeah. I have tons of issues with it using up memory.
Yeah, it uses obscene amount of memory. But they have taken some steps in the recent release. What are we up to? Yeah, they're up to 54. I'm on 54, but it looks like it's going to be updated to 55. 55 is supposed to bring some big improvements in that, so I'm anxious to see here after I restart if any of those show big boosts for me. Firefox and Rover says Firefox and SeaMonkey, and uh-oh, apparently I got some video playing. Good thing you're not doing the show. You take over for a minute. I'm trying to figure out my videos that are playing apparently.
Rover says that he's using Firefox and SeaMonkey.
Yeah, those SeaMonkey is a is that a Firefox derivative or is that a Netscape derivative? I can't remember.
I can't type today.
SeaMonkey was popular, as I recall. Let me look into that. It's been a while.
It's a continuation of the former Mozilla application suite based on the same source code, which itself grew out of Netscape Communicator and formed the base of Netscape 6 and Netscape 7.
So generally I was right. And it's got a good IRC client built into it. Well, neat. Maybe I'll give it another try. I know a large number of people do use this. Oh, and look at that. They're apparently sponsored by Private Internet Access, a VPN service that we've used before here. So that's
interesting.
Yeah, thanks for bringing it up, Rover. And Nelson tells us that he's happy with Chrome. Can't say I've been happy with Chrome, but
say it's done the job.
It's done the job. It's my go-to right now. And if they do make the improvements regarding the memory usage that they're claiming for this newest release, the 55, and continue to do that things or take those types of, or continue to make those types of improvements moving forward, I think it'll be in a much better position. I will go back to being happy, truly happy with it. But right now, it's kind of a love-hate. So,
well, I mean, I keep a lot of tabs open all day long, and it was eating up a lot of memory to have all those open in Chrome. But Brantley tipped me off to an add-on called the Great Suspender, which suspends tabs when you're not. Crap! I sent out a funky link. When you're
that's good enough.
When you're not using them, and that's helped my memory usage a lot. So you might want to check into that if you're using Chrome. And
awesome. Well, thank you so very much for that. That is a great one. I actually use a different one. Let's see, which one do I use? I can't remember. What do I use? Do I use anything in that regard? I thought I did. No, maybe I'm not. Okay, I'm gonna look into that again. All right, great, thank you. Oh, check it, Call of Duty. I might have mentioned this briefly yesterday, but it looks like, you know, PC gamers love online play, right? Especially with those shooter games. Call of Duty is a huge franchise. You know, they're involved in esports and all sorts of other things. And having the PC gamer community all be able to compete with each other is a huge, big deal. You know, there have been segregation sometimes with console gamers and, you know, against PC gamers, and for some good reasons. You know, the console interface is different. It's potentially possible that the PC gamers would have a advantage with the you know, with a certain investment into input devices such as keyboards and mice and other things to make their lives a lot happier in the game, whereas you're kind of stuck with whatever controller is provided by the particular consoles typically. But basically, this is what they did here, I think, is unacceptable. So if you went to the Windows Store, the Windows 10 store, and purchased Call of Duty, you can't play with anyone on Steam. You can only play with people on the Windows Store.
Yeah, that's just ridiculous.
I mean, they're refunding players because there's nobody in. So in other words, they bought the game to take it home, and they're just waiting indefinitely for somebody to join up with them, and it never happens.
There's nobody there because nobody wanted to buy it through the Windows 10 store.
Yeah, and so complete refunds. It's crazy. Let me see. I think I have another article too on it. This is where Microsoft, this is the issue with them rolling out the gaming platforms. This is the issue with them rolling out cell phones. You know, they have too many compromises and not taking their consumers' activities into account. I mean, people buy those games for multiplayer action. For them, what studies did they do? What market research justified the position of that? I can't imagine there was anything, but
yeah, if you want to create a multiplayer world and you stick people in a little box, they're not going to be happy. It's just totally counterintuitive.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm starting to run out of. Oh, actually, we've hit our time limit.
Yeah, it's past 11.
Well, I'm sorry that went quickly. I thanks everyone for chatting it up. Appreciate the input, Rover and Nelson, on everything, and everyone else out there listening to us. We appreciate it from you all as well. Join us tomorrow. We'll be here at 2 o'clock tomorrow. We have a rotating schedule throughout the week. Starts off early and ends late on Friday, but we'll be picking it back up then. And if you have anything for us, please let us know. If we do tend to get out of the IRC chat at the end of this show, so if you had a question about our software services, please don't hesitate to send an email to sales or support@foolishit.com, and we'll get right to you.
Yeah, and
thanks so much.
If you're in the U.S. and you haven't noticed that today is election day, get out and vote. No matter who you're voting for, get out there and exercise your right to vote and have a say in your country's future.
Yeah, it's a privilege. It's something that we shouldn't dismiss. And I know I might, for instance, be voting for someone different than Proctor here might be voting for, but I really don't care who you're interested in voting for. Just do it. Just get out and vote, especially you kids out there and everyone else. There are facilities available to even drive you to polling places. So take a few moments. I don't care if you have to take some time off. It's worth it. To make this happen, and most employers are usually won't question this too much.
Yeah, there are going to be some long lines, so the sooner you get out there, the better.
And I wouldn't wait till the end. I would not wait till the last moment to get this done. And be safe out there too, everyone. There's really high tension, so hopefully everything will go smoothly. All right, guys, we'll catch you all tomorrow by internets. If you could take us out, Proctor, that would be awesome.
Oh, yeah, that is my job, isn't it?